Hello and welcome to Netskope SASE Transformation Awards panel discussion. I'm Joe Skarupa, former Gartner Distinguished Analyst and co-creator of SASE. I'm also a member of Netskope's advisory board, and I'll be your host for today's session. Netskope SASE Transformation Awards recognize companies that have demonstrated their commitment to strategic business transformation through the adoption of SASE. The winners are, in the category of SASE architecture, Elevance Health. In the category of product innovator, HubSpot. And in the category of network transformation, CSC DGR. Congratulations to all three winners. I'm proud to lead a discussion with representatives of two of the winners, Elevance Health, CSC DGR, regarding their SASE deployments. We'll be joined by representatives from HubSpot in a future webinar. Today, we're fortunate to have senior leaders and practitioners from both organizations, so we'll be able to get perspectives from both roles. From Elevance, we have Scott Allen, Director of Cloud Security, and Rachel Rader, Executive Advisor, Cloud and Enterprise Architecture. From CSC DGR, we have Richard Fecteau, Director of Information Services, and Francois Sauvé, Information Services Supervisor and Security Specialist. Thanks to everyone for joining us today. Let's start with Elevance today. The size and scale of what Elevance Health did is impressive, especially when you think about the demands and requirements that come from being one of the nation's largest healthcare providers. With over 100,000 users enabled and over 85 million attacks blocked over the first 30 days, nothing is small about what they've accomplished or what they continue to accomplish. Scott, let's start with you. As a senior leader, what were the business drivers that drove you to consider SASE? Where did they come from? I mean, were they driven by IT or by line of business, by someone else?
Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you, obviously, to Netskope for this opportunity to talk about our program and our accomplishments. To answer your question, which I think is a very good one, largely driven by the business, admittedly. We have a mandate to reduce the cost of healthcare. So when we see opportunities for consolidation and also enabling not only our associates and ultimately our members to be able to interact with our environment in a way that's going to be more efficient, more secure, and certainly more cost effective, that's something we're going to want to do. Now, admittedly, we also have an enterprise mandate for zero trust, which has been in motion for the better part of the past year. And there are a lot of folks that are working to make that happen. But one key technology integral to that is the enablement of SASE. Being able to transition from using a bit more, I guess we'd say, legacy VPN, sort of the crunch on the outside, chewing the inside, being able to leverage SASE to only expose those apps that we need to, based on the use cases specific to our associates interacting with the environment, reduces our attack surface. So that in and of itself makes sense. The other, I'd be remiss not to mention, is our CSO, Dustin Wilcox. Big proponent of Netskope, also a big proponent of zero trust and certainly CASB. Upon his entry in our organization, one of the first things that he made as his initiative was we had a presence in cloud, at that time a burgeoning presence in cloud, and he brought in CASB to help us secure that. Over the past 3 years, we've taken that initial instantiation, leveraging a cloud as a security broker, and then built upon that, leveraging the other advanced capabilities, ultimately culminating what is a part of that journey to full SASE. And I'll say that we're on the beginning of that journey. We've made a lot of accomplishments. Certainly there have been a lot of challenges, but we're well underway. And thank you for acknowledging that.
You're welcome. So you had a lot of challenges. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges you had just getting executive sign-off on a project so big, so far-reaching? How did you get sign-off? And do you feel that the project has been successful?
Great question. Yeah, in some ways it harkens back to that initial investment where we identified an opportunity. So over the course of the past roughly 3.5 years that we have had a relationship with Netskope, we have the reputation that we have built, the consistency of delivery, and the value proposition that we have seen from our investment has helped to be sort of an organic justification for those expenses, and they certainly align with our organizational directives. So some things, admittedly, happen that are serendipitous, that makes it a little easier to move forward. You know, sometimes the planets align. In this case, we had a plan, we had a solution, we had existing investment, we also had a very clear understanding of that technology and what it was going to take to operationalize it. The other part, though, that is tricky, is admittedly, is once you have that senior leadership buy-in, is the socialization of that idea down the stack, and then the mobilization of everybody to make it a reality. And that's where a lot of the work really happens. And that's where, and I know you'll speak to her in a moment, but that's where folks like Rachel, who's our lead for Netskope, has come very much in the forefront of making that a reality. It's just building those relationships, constant delivery, positive reputation, consistent results, and you just keep going from there.
So now let's take a look at it from a different perspective. Rachel is the person with the really hard job of making SASE real in this very large, complex, geographically distributed environment. First, what was your approach to communicating your needs to management? And then secondly, how in the world did you get your network and security teams to work together?
That's a great question, Joe. Thank you so much. And again, it's an honor to be here with you guys in the panel here today. The things that I've been looking at as we've established our CASB relationship with Netskope is that the first thing I needed to do is make sure that we had a project, all of our business goals and projects documented to make sure we can break those down into something that's manageable to achieve. So creating that standardized development integration plan to leverage across the organization, including, as Scott has mentioned, with our subsidiaries. We have over 20 plus M&A, different types of subsidiaries that are in different flux of becoming either Anthem or as they like to call it, risk parity. They would reach a certain risk parity about them to be able to bring those subsidiaries in. So if we're bringing in subsidiaries, we needed to have a subsidiary integration plan, and we need to have testing plans, and we need to have our run books and all of our documentation to make sure that we're able to pull all this information in and do it in a way that is organized, and that we're making sure we're crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's for all those processes. So having that creation of the documentation and our plan, and utilizing our governance and operational processes and streamlining how Netskope is deployed and adopted across our Advanced Health. And then also to make sure that we're following Netskope's best practices to implement those solutions from an enterprise-wide and to the Advanced Health subsidiaries as well. And then basically partnering with our customers, our stakeholders, our trusted partners, and having that implementation and that management plan going forward, and working that plan to make sure we can integrate the subsidiaries, make sure that we're getting all of our devices set up, making sure we have our governance in place, making sure that we also are working with our cloud exchange as well. So there's quite a bit of information, and to make sure that you have all these things in place to let leadership know what's going on, so we can work that plan and move it forward. And then as you go into the SASE model, then and adding those additional components in year after year.
So that, I think it was really good in terms of explaining to us just the level of complexity involved in a deployment with an organization the size of yours. Were there a couple of elements from all of that work you had to do that really got management involved? That when they saw this, it was, okay, yep, let's go and let's keep going. Were there just one or two that really got it with them, or did they have to look at this entirety?
It depends on certain circumstances. Like for instance, when we were trying to get our devices set up on all the machines, we had to do those in waves. So we couldn't just automatically turn on everything at once. We would have to do 50 to start, 500 for the next round, 1,000, and then build up to 10, 15,000, and it had to be spread across for our early implementation and integration. And then as we've have our quarterly updates as we're going through the process of having our maintenance done, we also have to go through a whole change control process, which is vetted very heavily throughout our organization, and leadership has to get involved there to make sure that we're not causing any outages, because this being such a large organization, there's so many variables that they know and have in back of their minds, and they have to make sure that any changes that we're implementing are not negatively impacting the rest of the organization. So from a leadership perspective, they have to be aware of these changes that we're implementing, be it in the integration or for our upgrades, since we have to do this quarterly. And as Scott has mentioned as well, we have different times of the year where we have open enrollment and things of that nature. Our call centers, we have to be very cognizant of not messing up the business as they're trying to do open enrollment for the healthcare across the country, so we're not causing any problems there. So we have to make sure that we're working around all those things and that we're communicating closely with our leadership in order to get those items moving forward. And then we also, from a subsidiary standpoint, we have a overarching governance area where they're not just working with Netskope to integrate within our subsidiaries. There's many other tools that are in our environment that are also trying to integrate with our subsidiaries, which they're so small, and they have all of us coming at them at once to make sure that they're able to integrate within the Elevance Health overall environment. So we try to work with them, make sure it's an easy process for them, and can try to help them get integrated and make it easier for everyone. Thus, we have our subsidiary project plan to help with those processes, and we incorporate that with our partners there.
Okay, one other thing is, this is such a broad and sweeping program. Did you have to get somebody like the cloud migration team involved? Because, as a lot of companies do more and more work with cloud hosted apps or their own apps running remotely, that becomes a challenging issue. So did your cloud migration team play a part of this?
So admittedly, one of the things that, going back to serendipity, is that, as you mentioned, Rachel's title, she's part of the cloud organization, as which both at mine as well. So that makes it a bit easier as part of architecture, cloud, and other elements that we're responsible, including network security architecture. That greases the skids, if you will, to indulge an idiom. The other part is, as Rachel alluded to, is building that consensus with them and understanding the value proposition for them. There are instances, and if I focus on VPN in brief, where organizations of our size that have grown through multiple acquisitions over many years, you have varying degrees of integration, and oftentimes when you acquire a new entity, they're going to have their own existing infrastructure. So one example would be VPN. Everybody has their own VPN. How do you integrate? How do you interoperate? Consolidation down, reaching risk parity for us, which is basically reaching an equivalent requirement for compliance to be able to be connected to our environment post-acquisition. So talking about this with networking, helping them understand that there is actually also a value proposition relative to administration. Why support 3 or 4 different VPN solutions? Why not have a single team do it? Do it in a way that's going to be efficient, and as Rachel mentioned, they see the value and the benefit to them, and they understand the compelling argument as it relates to the delivery of the applications and services for our customers, which is ultimately what our goal is.
Now let's shift to a very different environment. While the challenges for Elevance were large, you might say that SASE was feasible only because they have a large resource pool and that it just doesn't apply for anybody who isn't a global company. But that's really not necessarily so, as CSC DGR shows. Now you might wonder, who is CSC DGR? They're a ministry-funded French Catholic school district in Ontario, Canada. And by their very nature, they have limited resources. Nevertheless, they strive for a world-class leading approach to security, and they've transformed their network to enable the entire student and staff population of about 6,400 users and more than 7,000 devices to securely work, teach, and learn from anywhere. Now, this has also allowed parents to understand that as a school board, the cyber protection of their children is of a very high priority. I think it's fair to say that no Netskope customer puts more care into who they provide security for. Now, Richard, since my French is worse than terrible, first, please share the full name of your school district, and then please share what drove your decision to deploy SASE.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. So first of all, the school board name is Conseil scolaire catholique de district des Grandes Rivières. Also, I'd like to thank the Netskope team in this project. The sales, the implementation, and the support staff have been wonderful. It's a very, very pleasant journey for Conseil Grandes Rivières. So as for what drove our decision behind the SASE implementation, I would say that the student and staff security in the digital world is the primary factor. Securing the integrity of our network from predators was also a very close second. That said, the implementation of our SASE allowed our students to do online learning in a secure fashion and ensure that they had the same security at home or as they do at work, at school.
So it sounds as though you feel like you've had a successful deployment, and that's obviously no small thing to do. How did you manage to get the resources? Because school districts, I used to work for a public education institution. Resources are always hard to come by, and it's not just funding, but it's the time from the people that you need. How did you get the resources allocated to do this?
Yeah, you are right. It's very limited on funding and staffing. So prior to implementing SASE, we did not have a dedicated cybersecurity specialist position, even though the board took very seriously the security at the for students. We didn't have a dedicated person. So now convincing the administration to invest in cybersecurity meant that we needed to demonstrate that the SASE platform was necessary, and it was an advantage to all of our students and staff.
So did the impetus for doing this, did this come from IT? Did it come from administration on the board? What was it that got this kicked off, that really got it moving?
I would say that in collaboration with the government of Ontario, the Ministry of Education in Ontario, there was mentions of that this is the way boards should move towards. So we took the initiative from a few presentations and we moved forward as IT to secure the students and the access and the infrastructure. But the pedagogy side really enjoyed it because they were able to offer the proper tools and websites and access to the students that are secure, with less impact and less task on the teacher to be always paying attention and watching exactly what every student does.
Well, it sounds like you were able to do something that, from my experience, is hard to do, which is you got the educators on board and on your side. And it sounds to me like what you did was you showed them how they could be more effective in teaching. And I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that was really a critical part. You got those key stakeholders involved by showing them how this delivered something to them, not some obscure cybersecurity promise, but something that directly related to their mission of teaching.
Yes, definitely. Enabling the teachers to effectively do their jobs and to be more comfortable and reassure them that there are tools protecting them and the students really helped. It was a very key seller in the project.
Yeah, and I would expect that anybody deploying SASE, whether you're Elevance or whether you're a school district in Ontario, that's a critical factor. That really helps. Francois, so you get approval to do this. Now you, with the limited capabilities that you've got within a school district, how did you make it real?
Thank you, Joel, for the question. That's a great question. And thank you, Netskope, for having us on board. It's pretty amazing that you've chosen us. So to answer your question, we're all about, learning and teaching at Grande Rivière. So my first thought was, well, if I'm implementing this, it cannot negatively impact student learning, because you are moving all your traffic into the cloud. So that was one of my biggest criteria, is like, this needs to be seamless. They need to connect. And if I put it on it, I don't really tell them it's there. They feel like there's nothing there. It just feels like you're going on the internet. So once I got that tested, and I felt like, what, this is a really feasible solution. I presented it to Richard. I'm like, we can really do this. We went ahead and did a cost analysis on it, and we pared down our perimeter. We said, well, what if we just bring down all these features that SASE provides us? Let's take them off the perimeter and invest in SASE. And once we did the analysis and saw that it wasn't a huge price difference, it just made sense.
It sounds terrific. It sounds like you guys really got it focused and you were able to deliver it. Was there something in particular that really helped you be effective at making the pitch up to management? Because again, I'm sure it was more than just once. You had to go back and ask for things you needed help with. Anything in particular? Was it just about your focus on the mission of teaching?
Of course, that was our main focus, but of course, the security was a big portion of it, because we felt like we have really nice security inside our perimeter, but when they go home, when they go to remote learning, it's really a different world. And with the reality of, just like Richard mentioned, the pandemic and us moving to remote learning for everybody, it wasn't as clear cut. Our perimeter had disappeared. Like, nobody was within our perimeter. So once we pitched that to upper management and said, you know what, our security's in the schools, but nobody's here anymore, we need to do something about it. It sold itself.
Hey, I want to quickly just get a question to everyone on the call, and let's stay in Ontario to start. Is there one thing you wish you had known when you started that would have made this whole process, this whole adoption easier? By the end, you knew it, but if you'd known it up front, it would have made a big difference. Or something you would have done differently or sooner?
Well, I can answer that one, Joe. So Netskope has a wonderful tool, Advanced Analytics. If we would have leveraged that tool at the starting of our project, we could have had reports on how it was going, and the usage in the schools, and the different tools that were blocked, or websites that were blocked and unblocked. We would have used that to our advantage, the Advanced Analytic tool, to make more informed decision as we're moving forward.
Interesting. Scott, anything from your side, or Rachel?
One of the things that would have been something that would have been nice to have up front is having a better understanding, but you learn that as you go, having that training, as the other gentleman had mentioned, with the advanced analytics, being able to really understand what those, once you have the data in there and understanding that information that's in there, it's easier to provide that information up to leadership of what kind of data that you're being able to provide out of those reports. They're extremely valuable in being able to understand, what all the different components of those advanced analytics offers. Those are not always just easy to understand right off the bat. You really have to dig in and make sure that you're pulling the data properly to get the right information that you're needing to get. So I also agree with the advanced analytics, and so also with some of the additional training, that upfront training, to be able to keep things moving a lot faster.
It sounds like from everybody, the focus is, how can you leverage advanced analytics to go from data to insight, and then from insights to inform the business? Is that a fair summarization?
Well, the way we would say it is, intelligence drives maneuvers often. So you make decisions based on your intelligence. I would argue also one of the things that we probably would have liked to have a better handle on, and I certainly echo the thoughts of others, is the scale. The grass is always greener on the other side. When I see our colleagues, the great work they're doing in Ontario, I'm a little bit jealous of their agility and their speed to probably get things done. I'm sure there might be some things that we might have that they'd be interested in, but I will say I'm certainly jealous of that, because the scale and the level of complexity of our environment, and also the nuance of it as it relates to building consensus, getting agreement, and be able to move forward with initiatives that are this far-reaching and as important as it is, certainly is quite an arduous undertaking. And then once you have that, then it's a matter of building momentum from there.
So Scott, when you talked about, you were sort of envious or a little jealous of some of the agility. When you think about the deployment, you have considered maybe what you know now, would you have considered doing it slightly differently? Maybe you do the call centers globally, or maybe you do a geography, or maybe you do, a particular acquisition, something where you get a measurable thing done, you can control it a bit more. Would you have thought about it slightly differently?
You're actually, so you touched on a couple of really good points there. Yes, I'll say that, we try to eat the elephant one bite at a time. At the same time, call centers for us are a bit more problematic. Looking for, and we have, identifying an area where it's going to be the best value with the least amount of impact. So obviously we can't disrupt the business. Have to be able to prove it out. And also that is a very important time in building confidence, right? So that initial instantiation where we're going to do it. What we would do differently, I think one of the things I would have liked to have done is, and we've actually pivoted to do this, is targeting subsidiaries first. So once we've identified the solution and how we want to move forward, SASE in this instance, rather than getting to a point where we have maybe say full integration, we can leverage things like SASE for early enablement and onboarding without the need for direct, like sort of a B2B connectivity. We can have comms connectivity only exposing maybe O365 through that limited interface for those entities to work with us. So yeah, I definitely think there are things that could have been, but I will say part of the lesson is the journey, right? So I mean, you can have a really great plan on the front end, but there are so many things that get changed as you go through and get that experiential knowledge, right, that you learn like, we could have done that better. And each time I hope, and that's my expectation for the team that I've seen it delivered, is that we iterate and we constantly refine our process and also always keep focus on the customer service aspect of it. Because at the end of the day, this should be transparent to them. It should be a business enabler. If they know us by name, I probably haven't been successful at my job. So.
Yeah, the best you can hope for is no one ever knows who you are and no one ever calls.
Exactly, the best administrators.
Yeah, and I can tell you, when I was an analyst, one of the things that organizations use SASE for specifically was to enable M&A. To say, we've got this organization we're bringing in, we're going to do them first because it gives us that leverage and control with the new organization. So that's interesting. So one more question. As parts of these deployments, folks often get very, very focused on the security benefit of SASE, but with the greatly distributed environment that we all live with today, whether it's remote work, whether it's recovery from pandemic, whether it's small office, branch office, can you give us a little bit of insight about the importance of networking, not just security, but having high performance, highly available networking to deliver a secure environment?
Yeah, with the pandemic, also the distributed workforce that we have, and still distributed, we have a hybrid model, and the convergence of technologies, coupled with the fact that, to your point, not just a security enabler, but how does it enable the business? So a good example is remote office, satellite offices, leveraging SD-WAN. We have a significant investment in infrastructure for networking distributed throughout our entire enterprise, certainly in on-prem, but also it is in each one of our satellite locations. And if we're going to an agent-based solution that enables access from endpoint direct to cloud, why come back to on-prem? Why maintain all that infrastructure and maintain all that connectivity, which is also technically part of the attack surface, and reduce that to something that's more defensible, more manageable, more economically efficient, and provides ultimately a better and faster experience. We talked about M&A, we haven't talked about onboarding. The time to onboard an associate without the need for all that infrastructure in a location or all the additional hardware, and even the utility of being able to only have an agent deployed or an agent in combination with, say, something like an enterprise browser, where you access the environment, you can be onboarded in less than a day. Where typically in an organization of our size, it takes weeks, especially with supply chain challenges, right? So I have to ship it from here to you to a location. You have to log in. If I can do all of that, leveraging a trusted and secure connection, it's a game changer. It's a game changer.
All about enabling the business.
Exactly.
Well, on behalf of Netskope, Congratulations on your awards, and thanks to everyone for taking time to share your experiences with our viewers. And to our viewers, thanks for joining us. Hope you have a great time at the rest of SASE Week.